Hi guys, it's Mrs. Wenner. We are going to go over this story. I'm going to model to you how we actively read. Make sure that you do this and do all the exit tickets that go along with this story. There are two stories that go together. Next week we'll be reading Arachne. This week we're reading Apollo's Tree, the story of Daphne and Apollo. It's a classical myth retold by Mary Pope Osborne, who is the author that we read last week. She also wrote the Magic Treehouse series. So the first question here is, can pride ever hurt you? First of all, do you know what pride is? Okay. Key idea. It's good to have pride in yourself as well as in your accomplishments, but when pride turns to conceit, boasting, it can get you into trouble. So first of all, the word conceit and the word boasting, we may not know what those words mean, so let's figure that out. Well, I know what it means to boast. This means to kind of brag. You brag about yourself, you think you're better than everybody else. And conceit means that you are arrogant. You're full of yourself. Some classical myths, such as the two you are about to read, serve as warnings about the dangers of being overly sure of yourself. It's okay to have confidence. You don't want to be somebody who's arrogant and brags about themselves all the time. People don't like to be around people like that. So page 657, let's read about the author. Let's read about the literature, the genre myths. So literary analysis, the cultural values are the standards of behaviors that a society expects from its people. Now remember, we learned last week that sometimes myths were told to help people understand what goes on in life, maybe to make sure that their character traits are of value and not bad character traits. Remember, character traits are how you would describe somebody, their personality qualities that somebody would have. Culture values are the standards of behavior that a society expects from its people. Myths and their themes reflect the culture values of the societies in which they were first told. Some values often taught in Greek and Roman myths are respecting your elders. Your elders are people older than you. Respecting and obeying the gods who are often involved in humans' everyday lives. Knowing your place. As you read Apollo's Tree and Arachne, notice what happens to the characters who do not maintain these values. Then determine what lessons are being taught by the myths. So the reading strategy that they're focusing on is predict. When you predict, you make reasonable guesses about what will happen next based on clues in a story and your own experience. Predicting is a way of becoming more involved in a story and gaining more enjoyment from reading. Absolutely. As you read each of the myths that follow, create a chart like the one shown to record your predictions. Now remember, I want you to actively read, so you can open this story in Kami and mark it up, and then you need to share it with me. But there are all kinds of graphic organizers or pictures that you guys can use as you read the stories. Hopefully you've picked up a couple. Remember when we did all those text structures, there were graphic organizers for certain kinds of text. So vocabulary and context. Here are the vocabulary words that you need to define and put into your digital notebook. Let me read them to you. Distorted, exquisite, immensely, indignantly, obscure, obstinacy, ominous, and sacred. So make sure those get into your digital notebook and make sure that they get defined, and we will go over them on Wednesday. So let's get reading the story, Apollo's Tree. The story of Daphne and Apollo, retold by Mary Pope Osborne. So this means that she did not write this, she heard this, and she is retelling the story. Now remember, when we have titles, we don't just skip the title, because remember, the title tells us usually what the theme is of the story. So you can get a lot from reading the theme and analyzing the theme. Now I know Apollo is a god. I don't know, I know he was a very important god to the Greeks and the Romans, but that's all I know about him. The story of Daphne and Apollo, I'm going to guess that this is probably a love story, just because I know Daphne is a girl's name. I don't know. I haven't read this story yet. Now you guys can listen to this. I have the audio on Classroom, but I'm just going to read it to you and do what we would do if you guys were here in class. One day when Apollo, the god of light and truth, okay, so Apollo is the god of light and truth, was a young man, he came upon Cupid. Now I know Cupid from Valentine's Day, he's the god of love. So I think I was right. This is a love story. So there's my prediction. I'm making a prediction. I'm thinking ahead. And I used all my background information to come up with those predictions. Playing with one of his bows. What are you doing with my bow? Apollo asked angrily. Don't try to steal my glory, Cupid. I've slain a great serpent with that weapon. Play with your own little bow and arrows. Your arrows may slay serpents, Apollo, said the god of love, but my arrows can do worse harm. Even you can be wounded by them. I wonder what worse harm it is. Now, knowing that he is the god of love, I'm wondering if this has to do with falling in love and getting your heart broken, because that can hurt people deeper than being shot by an arrow, maybe. With that ominous threat, okay, so remember connotation. This goes with threat, so this word sends me a negative message. That's not a very nice word, I don't think. Cupid flew into the sky and landed on top of a high mountain. Then he pulled 2 arrows from his quiver. Now, we've had this word before. A quiver is where the arrows are held. It also means to shake, but in this context, I believe it's probably the thing that the arrows are held in. One had a blunt tip filled with lead. Whomever was hit by this arrow would run from anyone professing love. Oh boy. So I bet you he's going to shoot Apollo with this, and somebody's going to love Apollo, and he's going to run from her. The second arrow was sharp and made of gold. Whomever was hit with this arrow would instantly fall in love. Oh, so I bet you that he shoots Apollo with the one with lead, making him not go towards the love. And then I bet you the other one with the gold tip goes to Daphne, and I bet you she loves him. So over here on the side, you can see that ominous means threatening or frightening. So I was right. This word has a negative connotation. Remember, connotation is the way that a word makes you feel. The second arrow, whomever was hit, okay, so that was A. So this is all my active reading. This is what I do as a good reader. And then look over here on the A, it says predict. Read lines 1 through 12. What do you think Cupid is going to do? Add your prediction to your chart. Well, since I was already actively reading, I already know the answer to that. So if you guys learn to do active reading and get in the habit of doing this, you are already going to answer the questions that test makers ask. Active reading is very important. You'll use this clear up and through college. Cupid pulled the bowstring back and shot the blunt-tipped arrow at Daphne. The blunt-tipped one. So she doesn't love him, right? Right. So this was the lead one. So she's going to ignore probably Apollo. Doesn't love him. Oh, wow. When the arrow flew through the air, it became invisible, and when it pierced Daphne's heart, she felt a sharp pain but knew not why. Holding her hands over her wound, Daphne rushed to her father, the river god. Father, she shouted, you must make me a promise. What is it? Called the god who stood in the river, surrounded by water nymphs. Now, this word's odd to me, but I know what a nymph is because of the Disney movies that I watched as a kid or watched with my kids. And you can see down here, here's a footnote. A nymph, any of a number of minor gods represented as beautiful maidens in Greek and Roman mythology. And then there is a picture. That's what a nymph looks like. Page 660. Promise I will never have to get married, Daphne cried. The river god, confused by his daughter's frantic request, called back, but I wish to have grandchildren. No, Father, no. I never want to get married. Please let me always be as free as Diana. I know Diana is a goddess, but I'm not sure what she's the goddess of. But I want you to marry, cried the god. No, screamed Daphne, and she beat the water with her fists, then rocked back and forth and sobbed. Sob means to cry. All right, shouted the river god. Do not grieve so, Daphne. I promise I will never make you marry. And promise you'll help me escape my suitors, cried the huntress. I promise I will, called the river god. So over in B, cultural values. Reread lines 25 through 34. In what way does Daphne's behavior show disrespect towards her elders? Well, first of all, when somebody who's older than you, especially your parents, tell you to do something and you say no, that's disrespect right there. Being older, we've already got people who are older than you have already gone through life. And sometimes maybe they've gone through the same situation as you have and they've learned from their mistakes. So it's important that you respect what older people say to you. After Daphne secured the promise from her father, Cupid aimed his second arrow, the sharp gold tipped one. This is the one that makes people fall in love. At Apollo, who was wandering in the woods. Just as the young god came upon Daphne, Cupid pulled back the tight string of his bow and shot the golden arrow into Apollo's heart. The god instantly fell in love with Daphne. Even though the huntress's hair was wild and she wore only rough animal skins, Apollo thought she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Hello, he cried, but Daphne gave him a startled look, then bolted into the woods like a deer. Okay, so right there, that's a simile. Do you remember what similes are? It's a comparison between two things, using the word like or as. Apollo ran after her, shouting, Stay, stay! But Daphne fled as fast as the wind. Another simile. Don't run, please, cried Apollo. You flee like a dove flees an eagle. Another, lots of similes. But I'm not your enemy. Don't run from me. Daphne continued to run. Stop, Apollo cried. Daphne did not slow down. Do you know who I am? Said the god. I am not a farm boy or a shepherd. I am Lord of Delphi, son of Jupiter. I've slain a great serpent with my arrow. But alas, I fear Cupid's weapons have wounded me worse. Repetition. That's what Cupid said, isn't it? Daphne continued to run, her bare limbs lit by the sun and her soft hair wild in the wind. Apollo grew tired of begging her to stop, so he began to pick up speed. On the wings of love, running more swiftly than he'd ever run before, the god of light and truth gave the girl no rest until soon he was close upon her. How do you think the myth will end? Well, I think that they were pierced with the arrows of Cupid, and I think that she's going to ignore him. And I bet you Dad comes into the picture because remember she asked him to help her. Oh, look at here. Her strength gone, Daphne could feel Apollo's breath on her hair. Help me, father, she cried to the river god. Help me. No sooner had she spoken these words than her arms and legs grew heavy and turned to wood. Turned to wood? That's weird. I wonder why they turned to wood. Then her hair became leaves, and her feet became roots growing deep into she became a tree. She had become a laurel tree. Down below, laurel tree is a Mediterranean evergreen tree with fragrant leaves and small blackish berries. She had become a laurel tree, and nothing was left of her but her exquisite loveliness. Exquisite is extraordinary beauty or charm. Apollo embraced the tree's branches as if they were Daphne's arms. He kissed her wooden flesh, then he pressed his hands against the tree's trunk and wept. I feel your heart beating beneath this bark, Apollo said, tears running down his face. Since you can't be my wife, you'll be my sacred tree. Sacred means worthy of great respect. I'll use your wood for my harp and for my arrows. I'll weave your branches into a wreath for my head. Heroes and scholars will be crowned with your leaves. You'll always be young and green, my first love, Daphne. Over here at D, think about what happens to Apollo. What lessons does the myth teach? So, hopefully you guys can go through and do your own active reading and then share it with me on Kami. Don't forget to do your exit tickets and also put your vocabulary words and their definitions into your digital notebook. Remember, there's a digital notebook coming up in December. And I hope you guys have a great day. Please make sure that you are signing in daily to class. And we will talk to you later.